Hi, everyone. Welcome to the August Community Open edX Community Online Meetup, August 13th. This is being recorded for the participants here in the room. Glad to have you here live, and if you're watching later, welcome. I can't find my presentation window, of course. So for the Open edX community, as usual, all of our interactions are governed by the code of conduct, whether online or in person sometime in the future when we're able to do that. The way we interact asynchronously is through our discourse forum, which is at discuss.openedx.org, and I encourage you to join there. We have technical discussions, we have organizational discussions, we have questions, people looking for help. It's the first place to go if you're interested in interacting with the community. For synchronous discussions, we have a Slack workspace. There's a URL there on the screen where you can get yourself an invitation to it. And of course, we have social media. We have a blog, we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have LinkedIn. We're Open edX anywhere we can be. So please come and meet us there and join in the discussions there as well if you like. These online meetups happen once a month. If you want to present, you can get in touch. You can send us an email, OSCM, Open Source Community Managers @edx.org, and we have a Google form. You can actually submit a proposal for a presentation if you want to give one, which is actually how we got today's presentation. So before we get to the presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about the working groups in the community. These are groups that are led by the community and consist mostly, but not entirely, of community members. There's always some edX participation, but the goal is for it to be primarily the community coming together to get some things done. We have two active working groups right now. The first is called the Build, Test, Release Working Group, and they are focused on the Open edX releases. So for instance, they played a larger role in the latest release, the Juniper release that came out in June, than they had in the past. They helped to triage and fix problems as they came up. And now that group is prepping for the next release, which is going to be called COA, which will be coming out in December. For instance, one of the things the Build, Test, Release Working Group did just recently was decide to have disciplined 6-month releases. So for instance, we originally had planned to do 6-month releases, but various upgrades had made that difficult and so delayed a number of releases, including Juniper, which took 17 months to come out. The goal now is 6 months and really stick to it. And the Build, Test, Release Working Group is going to be a big part of figuring out how to make that happen and actually getting it done. The marketing working group is working on basically marketing, how to get the word out about Open edX. This group consists of people in various service providers, the people doing the marketing for those service providers, talking about what their needs are, what works with their customers, where we might be able to go and talk about Open edX to grow the community, grow the adoption, just generally get more Open edX out in the world. So I encourage you to join either or both of those working groups if their mission and goals align with your interests and skills. To join, you should go to discourse at discuss.openedx.org. There's an entire category there called working groups where meetings are announced and topics are discussed. Those groups are making good progress on doing more in the community for Open edX, and they can use more help. So I encourage you to get involved. As an open source project, our focus for contribution has always been write us some code and let's get it merged. But there's lots of other ways to participate, and these working groups can do those other kinds of work. So if you are not a technical person, or even if you are, but the Open edX code base is daunting, which I know it can be, these working groups can be a really great way to be an active part of the community and contribute in ways that are really valuable, even though they aren't lines of code. Are there any questions about anything I've said so far that we should discuss? No. Okay. I'm really excited today that we've got Beth Porter as a speaker. Beth was a part of edX back in the day. Beth and I actually sort of kicked off the first Open edX conference on the Harvard campus. She left edX.
There was one before that, actually.
There was one.
Switzerland.
And you're right. I am forgetting. I wasn't at the one in Switzerland. That was sort of a project day in Switzerland with some presentations. That's true. And you were there, and I was not. So Beth had been part of edX and left edX, but I'm pleased to say is still out in the community making trouble. I mean, innovating. So
mostly making trouble.
So I am really pleased that she is here to tell us about some of the work she's been doing at Riff Analytics, and in particular about group interactions in online courses. Oops. Yeah. So I will unshare my screen so that Beth can get in there.
Okay. You have to give it.
Yeah, I know. What do I have to do? I get this wrong every time.
I don't use Zoom.
Okay, there, go.
Okay, I will go, I think. Here we go. Can everybody see that? And by the way, it's great to see a couple familiar faces. I saw Peter's lurking in there somewhere. I can see him in the lift. Okay, so I am going to talk to these slides, but please interrupt at absolutely any time. Honestly, anything that just you don't understand or that rankles you or that you want more clarity about, anything at all. I'm happy to have this be extremely fluid and I won't be offended or anything. So just have at it and let's have a dialogue. It's a pretty small group, so that makes it pretty nice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about social learning at scale. I think the social learning part is probably a little bit more important than the at scale part right now, but I'll get to some of that as well. And we can talk a little bit about how this does and doesn't scale and what the issues are there. But it's really more about how to enable more advanced social learning in online environments. And of course, you know, like, I don't know how many people have kids or send them to college like I did this year or any, you know, age they're in. It's a big challenge right now on every single front, many fronts of which we cannot address. But there's a particular model that we use, and I thought I'd share that, and then we can talk about others. All right, so, oops. Okay, so what was the problem we set out to solve? How do we use the Riff platform to solve it? I'm going to highlight one of our partnerships. It's not the only one we have, but it's one that's sort of front and center that we can talk about. I'm going to talk about how we work with AppSembler to build a custom LTI integration, and then a little bit about our ongoing research, and I can say a few things about our customer engagements as well, many of whom are in the Open edX community, so those will be relevant here. All right, so I'm going to make a claim, which you can decide to believe or adhere to or you know, shout down or whatever, but many cognitive scientists, philosophers, educational researchers, and so forth have come before me to make the claim that all learning really is social. And in fact, an open source community is a perfect example of that, right? A lot of what we do, of course, is toil away independently and work on problems that we're trying to solve, but the sort of proof of that energy and commitment and work comes in the way that we share that with others, we learn from them, we refine our solutions, and then we go back to the drawing board and we do it all over again. So the social nature of learning is really, you know, whether you're a Piagetian or a Vygotskian or whatever other researcher you want to invoke as a learning person, this is the premise that we come into the problem space with. So I just thought I'd set that as context. So how do you achieve that at some degree of scale? People try a lot of things. Discussion boards, we could probably have an entire many-hour discussion in person about discussion boards and how well they do or don't work. And you know, we can talk about that. Peer-graded assessments, this has become a big new sort of, it was around for a while and then it kind of, you know, died, and there's obviously peer graded assignments in edX, and those keep coming back over and over again in new forms. Live sessions, polling is becoming a big popular new set of technologies out there. Project-based assignments, get people together, hope it all works out, give them something to do that's hard. And what people really actually want and that they use these other things as proxies for is they want something that mimics what happens in a classroom or a workshop or anything where you're in person. They want natural interactions. They want it to feel like the group is socially connected somehow, that there's this community of practice, and lots of the things fall short. And I think we're still even working on achieving this really lofty goal about online, but that's what we're striving. That's our goal. That's what we're trying to get to. So we built a platform. Now, the platform arose from two completely different disciplines, two separate and completely different disciplines. One discipline was social science, and it was formed when I met a professor at MIT, Sandy Pentland, who some of you may or may not know. He's a sort of a stalwart of the Media Lab, he's one of its founders. And he started talking with me about the importance of social connectedness in various environments, whether you're talking about a hackathon or you're in a bank or you're part of a customer service group or whatever. And that social connectedness is difficult to achieve and a key factor in trying to get people to be effective together in a workplace. And that it's if a group gets it right, and if groups of groups inside of companies get it right, or in schools or whatever, that is like the ultimate achievement of an organization, to have really mastered the small group interaction. And he studied it, and he's a computational social science and came at it from that angle. I, however, came at it from the learning angle, of course, and started as a teacher in my career. I'm still a professor over at BU and a lecturer at MIT. And, for me, collaboration is everything. It's part of what we do in every single interaction that we have with students is collaborative one. And I assume that in the broadest sense of the meaning I collaborate with the students, they collaborate with me, they collaborate with each other. It's all of the small interactions that make it so exciting to be in a class. And if you're not going to do that, to me, it's boring. And why would you do it? Because lecturing is not, even though that's what I'm doing right now, it's not really my thing. I prefer to have it be interactive. So we created this platform kind of taking those two ideas. There's this idea of small groups and how do they interact. There's this idea that we want something that feels really interactive and collaborative in schools or in colleges. And we met and we're like, oh, you're talking about the same thing I am. He's like, you're talking about the same thing I am. That's awesome. We should do stuff together. So that's sort of how it was born. And we enlisted some other people and we started this company. So we did some research. It was NSF funded research, which I'll talk about in a little bit, to talk about what really affects how people interact. And what we found was that if you gave them even just a very small, lightweight amount of feedback about that interaction, it itself led to better interactions over time. And further, when we put that into a learning context and we kept all the other variables the same, what we were able to show is that having both within team interactions, cross-team interactions, and whole class interactions led to a greater degree of engagement in the class, much, much more information sharing than the professor or teacher could ever be able to do as a single provider of the information themselves, because you're now having this whole network of people who are sharing information, and raises social presence. So the idea that it feels as natural being in this collaborative online environment as it does to be in person. And that in the end, all of these things led to better performance, better persistence, and better satisfaction. It's all in online courses. And that's a paper we're about to publish. So I'll tell people about it when it's out. So the Riff platform consists of basically three things. One, this EDU environment. It's sort of like Slack and Zoom got together, had a baby, and we put metrics on top of it. I know that's a very silly way to describe it in a way, but that's pretty much what it is. We took Mattermost, which is an open source Slack clone. We customized the crap out of it and put a bunch of our own stuff in it, including LTI, which I'll talk about in a bit, and also our own video client, and made a full, complete environment for doing all different nature of collaboration. The video tool itself is interesting and a self-contained experience, which gives you literally video chat, but it's all instrumented, and it tracks every vocal signal that happens in the call. So if we were on Riff right now, we'd be getting a little feedback in the corner, and every single vocal utterance would be tracked. And then we use that data to give people information back about interruption, affirmation, influence, dominance, equality, balance, that kind of stuff. So a little bit about rifedu, and sometimes also called Teams, depending where you deploy it. It looks really familiar. It looks like Slack, because it kind of is, but it isn't, because what we've done is made a bunch of customizations. We, obviously have privatized instances so that people can have their control over their data and what they want to learn about it. We do a bunch of analytics on top of all of these interactions between people. But essentially, the way that people use this is they use it to do all the things that you do in Slack today, right? Have public areas, have private areas, have direct messaging. You can sort of get to any scope of the group you want, and then use that to reach out to and build connections across the course. That we combined with rifedu, and it's all in the same area. So if students are having an interaction in their private groups, which I'll talk about in a bit, or they're having a DM, or even in the public forum, at any moment in time, they can ad hoc invoke a video call, and it has all of the metrics built in as well. And we track right now vocal signals. We're just about to release our facial redo. We refactored the entire facial gestural library that we were using originally. And later in the year, we'll have text analysis. And all three of these things, the vocal signal data, the facial gestural, which tracks emotion and nonverbal signaling, and the text analysis, give us a really complete picture of the communications network that got created inside that meeting across everything.
Wow.
Yeah, it's non-trivial work. I'll just say that out loud. It's complex at an extreme degree.
To what degree do you get into phonemes, syntax, language, communication sort of analysis, as if a paper was being shared and a conversation emerged from that?
Yeah, none at all right now. What we do is 100% binary on-off vocal channel data, meaning that if I spoke, it gets recorded. If I did not speak, it's a silence. And the reason that seems like it wouldn't be a rich enough signal, right? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, there's two parts to that. One, it's a richer signal than you might think. How much we interject, interrupt, affirm each other, like Ned just affirmed me a second ago when he said, wow, right? All of those, and how much we pause, how much silence we have, how many turns there are, all of that stuff is actually highly indicative of social connectedness in a way that I don't think most people would know. It's like a very deep recess of cognitive and computational social science, and we're just sort of pulling it up to the surface and saying, hey, we're all online. All the normal signals that you get from being with other people in person, including peripheral signaling, right? Stuff you don't quite have full total awareness of, it's all gone. Don't get it. You got the flat thing. You don't know if my cat just came wandering in here and threw up on my rug or something. You don't know nothing. You know nothing about my context at all. And so we're just trying to surface as much information as we can with the lightweight signal that we have, and that's what we do right now. That said, Scott, our next milestone is actually natural language processing, textual analysis toward two specific goals. One is synthesis and summary, so that people don't actually have to read or watch an entire recording, but they can get a summary of it. And the second one, we have some expertise in the team around that. And then the second one is topical convergence. So if you're talking about teams or negotiations or decision-making bodies of any kind, a lot of what happens is when you get to topical convergence, if Ned and I are having an argument or having a discussion and he starts to say the same words that I'm saying, we start to get some of that mimicry around the dialogue, then that is a signal of topical convergence. And it can go into retrograde, but a lot of what we'd be capturing would be that and not transcription necessarily. Does that answer your question? I hope.
Yes, thanks. More later. This is great. Thank you so much.
Cool. Okay, so then we take all that from the vocal record and we create these interaction visualizations that are dyadic. I'll explain it and then I'm sure people have questions. In a dialogue, even a multi-party dialogue, every interaction really is, that's when it's a dialogue and not a presentation, is a two-way interaction. Marco says something, I react to it. Scott says an interjection as a reaction to something that Ned said. Pierre perks up and says, oh, wait a minute, I don't understand. All of those things are two-part reaction and part of a volley, conversational volley. So we track all of those and we give them back to people as two-part visualizations on screen. So it's not just that we're having this dialogue, we're having multiple two-party dialogues all the time. And how you know whether somebody is influential, whether broadly in the whole group or just with another person, is by looking at the balance in all those two-party interactions. I'll give you an example that happens literally every day in my team. There's one other developer. He and I have known each other since before I had my kids, who are now 20. And so we have a very close working relationship, and we've worked together in 4 different places. We have a shorthand way of talking. We have a very, very, very interruptive style that doesn't bother either one of us. And you can imagine how our interaction looks like. When we're together, it's great. 2 people, we're like, like it's like a ping pong match, like it's fun. We find it energizing. It's the way we interact with one another. We get into a team meeting and I think everybody wants to kill us because it's the Mike and Beth show if we're not careful. So we use the interaction reaction stuff on screen to really regulate ourselves so that it doesn't become this highly dominant two-party interaction in a group meeting, and that feedback really helps us know how to regulate. And that's a lot of what this is really about. Okay, so I mentioned that we had, NSF supported research. This was a grant that we got last year. We are waiting for our phase 2, whether we're going to get it from the federal government or not, or if the federal government can get out of its own way to make a decision, who knows. But we are waiting to get to the next level of this research. It was extremely positive. We got great data and we're able to show these effects that I was talking about. And so we have a lot of ambitions for that second phase, and we shall see. If we get it, I will be telling absolutely everybody. So you won't be able to avoid knowing that it happened. So just a few things that I want to mention just for the logistics part of this. If you didn't catch it before, the key here is that we have this rifedu instrumented environment that looks a lot like Slack. We have the video fully integrated into that environment, so you can invoke it at will at any time, in any channel, in any scope, and have a video meeting on demand. And then further, rifedu is integrated with edX. It's sort of why we're here today in this chat, not just because this topic is interesting, but because specifically we built an integration that was for edX by extending the LTI X block and mapping some of the things that are happening in edX with some of the things that we wanted to have manifest on the Riff side of things. So I'm just showing a specific course in which we put a prompt that said, hey, that's a chat. Go over to the community environment and click right over using the button, and it does all the LTI linking stuff that you're accustomed to. And the interesting part of that is that it's not just a launch, link launch event. We bring over data that then Riff uses. Specifically, I think I show that next. Yeah, I'll show it in a second. So we have this relation. I'm going to skip ahead. Sorry, I'm just going to skip ahead. Doesn't matter. Specifically, we launch people into 2 parts of the environment. One, in the public channels. Bring them right to the town square, help them get oriented right out of the gate. This is the place that a lot of people use as a substitute for discussion boards, announcements, emails, chat tools, everything else. Courses that are running using Riff with edX are able to more or less replace take this and get rid of everything else. We have a course running, as I said in my previous slide, with Oxford and Esme, our channel partner, and they don't use anything else. It's like, well, if we have to, like somebody's behind a firewall or something like that, we'll drift over to email, but they don't want to. And within, I think they said within the first 3 weeks of the course running, they had, in a 65-person course that was running, they had over 5,000 messages already exchanged in this environment, and every single team active in their Riff channels as well as the Riff video. So it's a very active environment, all different kinds of topics, everything from tech support to topical discussions to clarity around the course itself, everything and anything inside the environment. So this is the typical use case for people picking it up and deciding to incorporate it into their courses. The atypical and special thing that we did was that through the LTI customization, people who are either in a cohort, so setting up cohorts on the Open edX side, or in a team, right? So they're electing to join a team, map into private channels in the Riff environment. So let's say that you want to assign people to teams. Then you can use the cohort functionality and get people into small groups and give them prompts and give them collaborative work to do. But let's say you also want to, as we've done with many classes, allow people to self-select into teams. Then they go and use the teams functionality in Open edX. They have a dialogue about which ones to join. They join, and then those are mapped into private channels as well. And so it seems really small, like tiny little piece of functionality that who cares, but it's huge for the community of people that we're trying to serve, because it becomes big fast, right? Even if you're only prevailing on a course of 60, 70, 100 people, it gets really hard to manage these things without having some very no energy almost to do features that help people get to the right spot and make sure they don't get lost. And so this is how the courses that use Riff to do collaborative learning, and not just small collaborative but big collaborative, use the Open edX tooling in particular to connect the course to the social learning environment. That is all available. These are the people who helped build it. Yay! Go team.
One of them is even here.
Yes, indeed. So we really prided ourselves on this highly collaborative activity, because it really was. We had Omar at Assembler and Amisha and Dave, who were providing guidance to make sure that this really fit in with the architecture of the organization, and Nate, very supportive as the person who leads Assembler, and we really appreciate that about the community, because it was a group effort and it resulted in something that was more generalized, that we could contribute upstream, and that made it possible to pass any number of different variables from the Open edX environment into a tool provider. And that was intentional, right? We didn't want to just build a custom solution that only worked for us. Our goal as an organization was to make sure that we could create something and submit it so that everybody could take advantage of it. So that was like intentional, not a mistake, and part of the goal.
I'm not sure we've had many mistaken contributions, but yeah.
You know what I mean, though.
Thank you.
No, we didn't just keep it in our own private repo and say, we just built it because we wanted to, because it would have been, we would take them like half the time if we had done it as like just an extension on the platform, and we didn't want to do it that way.
Thank you.
So anyway. Right, so it's there. We wrote a blog post about it. The code is there. The pull request is there. This is a year old now, so it's not particularly new code, but I think it's taken our community of people that we talk to about what we're doing at Riff a while to come around, because it's new. Lots of online courses are just broadcast. It's just projection, and this is more. right? It takes more work. The instructor has to understand how to do it. Sometimes instructors aren't involved at all. It's mentors, coaches, TAs, SMEs. A lot of what we're doing really relies on people to be conveners, and you can't just sort of throw it out there and hope for the best. There is a people versus, you know, augmentation factor, and that actually leads to our areas of ongoing research, which are what are the effects of the peer environment itself. You know, we've tried to really isolate that in our research, but people matter, and how they interact with the others in the course matters. So what's the difference? Can we separate those two effects? What other kinds of information will, you know, help not just the learners themselves, because this is all data that's going back to the individuals. What can we say to instructors? One of the things that we're creating right now is an instructor dashboard. So let's say you have, you know, 100 teams in an online course, and you're the instructor, and you're trying to look at all across those teams. Which ones are going to get your attention? Which ones are going to get intervention? Why? What do we surface? How do we do that in a respectful way that doesn't violate people's privacy, and still have it be helpful to them? So there's a whole set of questions around that. What other kinds of signals can we give? Emotional, nonverbal, text-based, as Scott asked about, individual nudging. Right now, all of our feedback on screen is collective, right? If you're in a team meeting, everything goes back to everybody, right? And so we've played with individual nudging, like, it's time for you to shut up now, Beth. You've been talking for too long, for example.
Just as a hypothetical.
As a hypothetical, never happens. Nobody who knows me knows. Everybody knows that I talk too much. And, you know, like, what's the right vocabulary? A lot of this is really deeply rooted in pedagogy, cognitive science, social science. These are some of the vocabularies esoteric. The visualizations rely on people being able to really see what's meaningful about it. So we have a lot of work to do on the user experience side, and just, you know, getting it right so that it's accessible for everybody. So I'll stop there. We are seeking other partners to continue to work with us on this stuff, and you know, I'd be very interested to get people's feedback, and just open it up.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. I have to say, my wow was very sincere. It looks like a lot of work that can give very interesting and important information. And one of my first question is there a way that we can try it? Like, this is clearly applicable even outside of education.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a 2 o'clock meeting coming up that I'm interested to know, like, who's stomping on who. But is that something that we can do?
Yes, you can try it 2 different ways. One, you can try just the video client itself. So that's just the video with the real-time interaction, and you just go to my.riffremote.com and you can download it. I'll put it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And use it. It's free, and, you know, we're committed to keeping it free forever. It will not have all of the bells and whistles of every single different kind of analytics that we can do, but we'll be keeping pace with most of this stuff and previewing it with people and letting them use it so we can get feedback. You know, we're an AI company, so usage is important.
Right.
Want as many users as possible.
Right. And
so that's just for the video, but on actually the Slack space that you were talking about, we have, if you come and ask me nicely, I can give you access to our demo environment. We are right about to release a new version. So we will be very soon releasing literally something that's called demo.rifedu.com, so that people can come, just like all other, you know, multi-tenant spaces, come and fiddle with it, see what it's like, interact with total strangers, just look at it so you can see what it's like, and you know, that sort of idea. And but that's not available yet, so just coming soon.
Okay. If other people have questions, feel free to unmute and ask them. I have another question while you're getting up your courage to do that. It's fascinating to think that there's live analytics about the dynamics of the discussion happening. Isn't that distracting?
Well, that's a great question, actually. And one of the reasons why we've made a very, and people complain about it too, actually, the little visualization on screen is called the meeting mediator. And some people think it's not distracting enough.
Ah,
Like
yes.
it
Like the
won't.
people who need the information aren't getting the information. Yes, I can see that happening. Yes.
So we pride ourselves on how subtle it is, and like it's like you just kind of are peripherally sensing it, and the purple ball basically moves toward the person who's hogging all the air in the room, and you can see it moving, and you become a little bit self-conscious about it moving, but it's only distracting enough to make you subtly change your behavior, not so distracting that you're like, I'm totally fixated on the purple ball. Oh my God, I'm losing this game. You know, I've
Right.
had people say, oh, the ball's moving toward me. Does that mean I'm winning? I'm like, oh my God, no.
No, it means you're losing. It means
Wrong thing.
it means you're cheating is what it means.
No. So, you know, we really want people not to gamify it, and like
Right.
for the dialogue to be natural. So we've kept with the super subtle feedback, and that's why I said, you know, we introduced some individual nudging.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that stops. Hey, you might want to speak up. Wow, you've really interrupted Eden a lot of times during this meeting. But people hated it.
The individual, they hated the individual. Why is
Yeah.
that? I mean, it's a subset of what's in the communal dashboard, right? So,
Distracting.
hmm.
We probably didn't get the right visual metaphor yet. I think we will introduce it. I think just our first go at it wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Do it again.
So,
I think
sorry,
Julia's tryone to get in here. Hi, Julia. Good to see you again.
Oh, it's good to see you. It's great to see you. Actually, I can't even turn my. I'm in a very bare bones room here, but it's great to see you all. So I wondered if is it just that it's distracting, or do people feel that they're being called out in public?
Both.
Because does everybody see that they're sort of being, or does something pop up on your own screen in like your own, sort of as a private chat, you know, like here we are on Zoom, you could have a private chat that pops up saying hello and nobody else would know.
We made it private, so we weren't calling. I mean, the calling people out is the public thing, right? Is the
Right.
mediator, which, you know, like it's pretty clear what's happening in the call. But the private messages were the thing that we don't think we got quite right in our first, our first go of it. I think just maybe needs to be more subtle, maybe needs to be less judgmental. I think a lot of people are like, well, how do you know that this is a meeting in which it's not appropriate for me to speak up at will? Or I think that was lacking some of the contextualization that's needed to make sure you get that right, and that you don't get it wrong as often as you get it right. So I think there's some work to be done there to get that. So a little bit of all the things you raised, Julia, for sure.
And Scott asked a question.
Putting a bunch of questions in the chat. Okay, yeah.
I'm hearing an echo now, but
my first question has to do with students who might not speak so readily in or riff in a sense in a learning conversation in group video, and how that their speaking might be elicited and also perhaps metricized.
Let me take that one first, and there's two different answers to that question. The first answer is that the meeting media actually does do its job in that sense, which is that in all of our studies that were originally in-person studies at the lab, people wore like a badge, and then we did them in these in-person small group meetings. Quieter voices were raised and louder voices were diminished, and that was a trend that you could see over even as few as 2 or 3 weeks. So with, you know, like getting the regular feedback, people change their behavior. And so that's why we've been very persistent with the meeting mediator, because it does work and it regulates people. And it's actually, we think, a really great attribute of the meeting mediator, that it can pull out the quieter, less dominant voices and get them, you know, get quiet leaders to speak up and say things and get their thoughts in there. The second answer is that some people never become comfortable in the vocal medium at all, ever, depending on who they are, personalities, whatever. And that was actually one of, not the only, but one of the driving forces behind having the chat medium. So that if you wanted to have this robust back and forth with people, and you only occasionally wanted to pop it over to the video, for a variety of reasons, you could have both, and that they would still be they'd be kind of linked together, and you could always feel free to choose based on your circumstance. Do I want this chat, or do I need the like high social presence value of a video? And totally have that be their choice about how they interact with their teams. We also have document sharing, which is another way that people like to go back and forth and like just do, you know, I remember doing an entire project in document sharing once with a team because we were far flung globally and we could never get together, and it was fine, like effective enough for what we needed to get done. So
very cool.
Do you do any whiteboarding?
Yeah, we can integrate with Whiteboard. I would say this, it's an underdeveloped feature right now. We have gotten it to work with a few things, and whiteboarding is by far the most popular request. So we'll probably pick one and do a deeper integration with it so that we can kind of commit to something that we know will work really, really well, while still being able to have ones that are not as closely supported, but still work. So one of the ones we've been looking at is Awe. Have you seen that? That one seems to work pretty well.
How do you spell it?
That's how you think it's spelled.
Like A-A-H?
W's.
Oh, A-W-W.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you can't find it, just let me know, Nate, and I can look it up for you. But
I just saw a really good open source whiteboard tool the other day. It has a very strange name. I'll look it up. Send it to you.
I thought Awe was a pretty strange name. But yeah, no, Whiteboard is super important. And what we find is that although we do document sharing now, so you can incorporate a Google Doc or PowerPoint or spreadsheet or whatever, and that just works with the selector permissioning, and very, very helpful. It's not often the medium that people want to use. They want to use whiteboards. Two other projects we're working on, one funded, one not, is we have a game simulation that's embedded in that cyber course that I was showing a quick slide on. That's a 0-day simulation. That's a collaborative exercise that's in Riff, but the game is inside of the shared window. They all pick role types. It's pretty interesting. And so we can observe both the performance of the team and their dynamics as a team. And they get to see each other and regulate their own dynamics working through this problem. And it's all live with the countdown clock and the whole 9 yards. It's pretty cool. And then another one is a math collaboration environment that we're working with a partner on to have that be embedded in Riff, so that students who are working on complex math problems together can work in small groups, have the live chat going, and work on their problem at the same time.
That's cool. Scott, can you give us a short summary of this question? It's a lot of text there.
Oh, I'm curious about the role of the conference method and how one might measure that with Riff. And that would include the natural language processing aspect, because beyond the verbal cues, the affect, I'll call it. In terms of, I don't know if students make points almost in a debating sense, right, when they add a good idea to a conversation that generates new, unanticipated good ideas. But that gets into more linguistics, which Riff is heading towards. But how do you assess some of those, or how much you approach some of adding more of conversational learning around serious ideas to Riff Analytics?
So I think there's two answers, maybe three answers to that question. Seminar is very interesting, right? And you can think there's lots of different manifestations of seminar. There's literally, the seminar that happens in classes, and they usually courses that are capped at 15 students, and you all sitting around a table, and you have an instructor prevailing, and so forth and so on. But there's lots of other examples of that. Boardrooms, writers' rooms. So this was one I recently I was like, oh, that's actually very interesting, because writers' rooms are actually specifically and exactly what we're interested in studying and optimizing for, which is it's complex, it's shared, it's a little bit competitive. So everybody's kind of like jockeying, but you have to be somewhat respectful, because if you look like a jerk in the writer's room, that's not a good look, right? So that's a really interesting crucible for us to study. I don't want to get too far off the tangent, but anyway, that size group, right? 7 to 12 to 50, that bigger than just a small working group. The dynamics that we can measure now, which could be interesting, are literally just the network. How many, right now, this has a very specific network pattern, this call we're having. I'm in the center of the network and you're all peripheral to it. And all the interactions are going through me. And that's okay, right? As an instructor, that may be the pattern that you're trying to optimize. No, I want to be able to prevail over this room and call on people and get answers and have that be the dynamic. But a more successful seminar, if you have sat in them, are the ones in which the center of attention is not the instructor. And the dialogue is popping between parties, and all of those little, remember I showed the dyadic or binary, pairwise measures. If those are strong, and it's not all just through the professor, that's like high art seminar right there, right? You've gotten to something that looks amazing from the point of view of idea exchange and decentralizing the dialogue and getting to a higher order functioning of the group than just listening and responding to the instructor. So even without natural language processing, we can do a lot.
I think you answered my question.
Okay, great. Anything else? We have, this didn't end already, right? We have another top of the hour?
No,
okay.
no, you're not talking into the void. It hasn't ended already.
Other thoughts? Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Beth. I am genuinely intrigued by what a tool like this could do for interactions. Being in the tech world, which is famous for having some structural imbalances, I am interested to see what this can do, and especially in an educational setting, since we're talking about Open edX and how learners can do better if the dynamics among the discussion is improved. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, I do have one other anecdote to share at the very end here, if nobody else has a question, although Peter just unmuted himself, so maybe he has a question he wants to interject with. Can't hear you.
If he's talking.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Heck fail. It always happens. There's one in every crowd.
So how does this get coded? What's the metric for can't make the microphone work?
Oh, we have that.
I was just going to ask about scaling. Curious how large of groups you've done, either for the video or for the chat.
The chat is practically infinite. Honestly, it's really just about the people who have to prevail over it. So one of the things that we are prioritizing, as I mentioned before, is an instructor dashboard so that we can sort of surface hotspots and make sure that there's some semblance of knowing what's happening even at the macro scale would be is valuable. And so we have all prototypes ready to go, and we'll be implementing that this fall and getting it ready for release for whoever's going to pick up the software later in January. So that's one way. The Riff EDU set, but on the video side, up till now, we've been doing, for those of you who care about this nerdy stuff, we've been doing all WebRTC peer-to-peer video relay, which is very expensive on your machine. It tanks your CPUs at about 6 or 7 people, and your machine starts to get very, very warm, even if you have a pretty high-powered machine. So we're actually moving away from a pure peer-to-peer, except for the smallest size meetings and on our free product, and going toward a central relay. It still uses WebRTC as the protocol, but it does a single signal up and a single down instead of a send it to everybody, get it back from everybody, because peer-to-peer is real expensive. And it does a few things. When we move over to a new backend, it means that we'll have better performance, bigger rooms, ability to just support a broader number of browsers and a whole bunch of other like table stakes features that we haven't had before. So that's coming soon. This is probably late September.
So I have a question. Decades ago at this point, almost now, I worked on something called the access grid, which did a multicast, so in effect, probably peer-to-peer,
Yeah.
with unicast bridges when people didn't have the full real internet to pipeline, which is what we were using, and has so much bandwidth, we never could fill it despite what we had. But one of the things that we really focused on for that particular product, and this was early on when the only other thing was Polycom, so
Right.
trying to do this nice video stuff didn't work, was that we had full duplex audio. And for those of you who are older, you'll remember once upon a time we had these old phones that were
I still have one, Julia.
full duplex audio. Makes a huge difference with interruptions versus not having it, because then you know when someone stopped. And so is there anything in
I haven't seen
interruptions, I guess is where I'm going.
Yeah, no, I think we can only, the best you can do with video is that you can be paying attention to what's happening on screen, and that if you go on video mute and you don't see people, then they don't see you, you don't see them, and you don't pick up on the visual cues that help you understand whether you're about to make a focal mistake, right, by just stomping on somebody. But the funny thing is that except in sort of artificial environments like a presentation where you're like, well, I don't know the dynamics of these other people, and I'm probably not going to learn in the course of one meeting with them. But in your own groups and your own teams and ones that you meet with any kind of regularity, even if it's only for a short period of time, like in an online course, you start to pattern build really quickly, and we're just providing the reinforcement layer for that. And you will learn right away whether you've been kind of an interrupting jerk. Even if not broadly with one other person, you'll learn it pretty quickly, and then you're like, oh crap, I gotta fix that. And so yes, duplex would be very nice, but I don't see it coming anytime soon. So we're gonna work with what we got.
Yeah, fair enough. It's
no, I completely understand. Yeah, for sure. I did want to leave with one anecdote. Actually, it's like an anecdote and a half. So I have a person I'm working with who is an autism coach. So she works with kids who are on the spectrum and who and their friends, and has these like virtual play dates and works with them. And she started using Riff actually for those interactions, because one of the things that's really meaningful for her kids and for her is that they can actually measure and codify something that is actually quite difficult to codify, which is the transformation of a kid over time to being able to have regular vocal relays like we all take for granted and can do very easily, to from a previous state of not being able to focus attention, not being able to actually carry on what would look like a fairly naturalistic conversation. So I thought that was a really completely and totally unexpected use case that we were not looking for. It's so complicated, and I'm sure some horrible FDA thing or some other crap is going to get in the way and prevent us from doing meaningful work there. Who knows? But it's just mostly been interesting to think about it in the context of just volleys, conversational volleys, and how much that actually is a challenging exercise for people even who are not in the autism spectrum. It's like trying to get it right and really perfect it and feel like it's natural and flows. It's a problem across all different kinds of groups and all different kinds of people. And it kind of took me seeing that to realize how conceptually durable this is across so many different kinds of problems and problem domains. And then I'll just give you a second example. And that same person said, oh, Riff is interesting. I wonder, I'm using it with these sort of baseline kids. What if I just use it with my daughter's book group? She's 9 and she has an online book group. And so she said, hey, I don't remember the girl's name, use this for the book group and see what happens. And it's 6 or 7 kids, and they get together on Riff, and they're just doing this whole very adult sounding, kind of like, oh, no, you talk. No, Riff is telling us that you really need to talk. Like, and they've completely embraced the tool, the feedback, the thing it's, they totally get it. Like, no introduction or information was given. They just completely got it. And apparently one of the girls in the group had like an iPad or something, it wasn't working, and the woman whose daughter this was said, hey, well, I guess we'll just go back to using Zoom. And they're like, no, we're not going back. That's not happening. So it's just really, and again, just like a population I wasn't seeking out and didn't know anything about and wasn't trying to please or optimize, and just the feedback was meaningful to them. Uh-oh, that's me. Lord. I hate when that happens. And I just thought I'd share those because I think that we get really focused on, the problem domains that we are interested in, and there's such a wide spectrum of interesting problems to solve here, and we're kind of trying to get at all of them and see if what we can learn.
Yeah. You should put it right on the homepage, recommended by 9-year-old book clubs, because it'll get your attention at the very least. Yes, well, so as your phone has just alerted us, we're here at the top of the hour. Yeah. So I want to thank you very much, Beth. It really has been eye-opening, and I am very impressed, and I am looking forward to trying it myself.
Please.
Helping groups of people talk better together sounds like a great thing. Maybe we could send it over to Congress and see what happens. So
that's not a solvable problem.
So thank you all for attending the monthly online community meetup. If you would like to do a presentation, get in touch, send us an email, oscm@edx.org, and we will see you in September. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody. It was great to see you all.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Beth.
Yeah.